home bakers, it's Jack here, bakeryjack.co.uk, bringing you your weekly bread making tip every single Thursday. And this week, how to and why you might want to prove your yeast before you start making bread. Roll that theme tune. Hello to you and welcome back to the Baked with Jack YouTube channel, where I share a little bit of my bread making expertise with you every single Thursday. If that's the kind of thing that you like and you're new, consider clicking subscribe before you go. Making bread that doesn't puff up is disappointing to say the least, isn't it? It's heartbreaking if you've painted a picture in your mind of oven glove clad hands emerging from the oven, cradling a perfectly risen loaf of bread, but it didn't puff up. It hurts, right? For that is the true home baker's dream. Last week we spoke about 6 reasons why your bread dough didn't puff up, and we touched on testing your yeast before you start to make sure everything's cool. Today we're going to do it for real, but first a small disclaimer. I never do this. I have never done this. I've been teaching bread making for 7.5 years. I've never even done this. This is going to be a first for me. I use fresh yeast always. I use a lot of it and I use it in class, and I'm pretty sure I can recognize the signs of when my yeast is getting old. I know how long I've had it for, and I keep it nicely to give it the best chance of lasting well. If you are in any doubt whatsoever whether it's fresh yeast or dry yeast, then let this test be your safety net before you continue. So let's cut to the table with a video and a super smooth voiceover from me as a special treat for you all, and we're going to prove that our yeast is working. See what I did there? It's clever, isn't it?
And here we are at the table with 2 glasses of water, which are both, out of interest, about 28 degrees C. And here I'm just popping in a teaspoon of caster sugar so it dissolves quickly. That's golden caster, that's why it's got that little colour. And I heard if you put your spoon back and forth like this instead of round and round, it's a bit more efficient to dissolve it, but who cares anyway, seriously, life's too short. I'm going to stir it up like this. It's changed colour obviously because of the colour of the sugar. It doesn't matter what sugar it is really, it's just as long as it's sugar. There we go. Sugar's in, it's dissolved, and in goes my yeast. I'm using the fresh yeast. I'm putting 10 grams in, and I'm going to put this one in the plain glass of water and this one in the sugary water. I want to do the plain one so you can see exactly what it looks like when nothing happens. Even though the yeast is good, there's no food for the yeast, so nothing's going to happen in there. And while we're watching this happen and my subscriber count smashes through the ceiling, let's chat a little bit about it, shall we? So what's going to happen now is the yeast is going to warm up a little bit and it's going to wake up. It's found the sugar, and sugar's food for the yeast. And when the yeast eats the sugar, it's going to huff and puff and make gas. This whole thing's called fermentation, by the way, and the gas it produced is carbon dioxide, in case you go into a pub quiz soon and you needed to know that. The step that we're doing here is often written directly into a bread recipe as if it was part of it, and as if it was part of it all along. And I'm often asked why there's no sugar in my recipes, because there never is, unless, of course, it's there for flavour, like if I'm making a sweet bun or something like this or whatever, or a brioche. But to be able to explain why I don't do it in mine, we need to talk about why lots of people do. Now, a lot of recipes often by default will say something like, wait for the yeast to puff up on top now and you're good to go. If it makes bubbles now, it will make bubbles in the dough. Then you know that you can continue the rest of the recipe and everything's going to be cool. It's a safety measure to protect your heart from breaking 3 hours down the line when your dough doesn't puff up. It's insurance, and it works, because if you reach this stage and your yeasty sugar water did not then do anything, if it didn't puff up or foam up or anything you're expecting, then you would not continue with the recipe and then swerve that potential heartbreak at the end. See, when people write recipes, when they're written, the person writing wants you to get it right straight out of the gate, just like I do when I write a recipe. And that's exactly why safety nets like these are in place. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, hold on a minute, why doesn't Jack put these safety nets in place? Does he not care about me? Does he not care? And the reason I don't is because I am of the opinion that it's just another faff that you could do without if you have a good understanding of bread making. Hence the previous 135 videos, whatever, attempting to educate you, so you don't have to follow sometimes unnecessary steps like these in every recipe without you really knowing why you're doing it at all, and without really ever giving you the choice. Oh, did you see that? Something's happening now. Here it goes. Yes, there it goes. Something's happening. In the same hand, I'm well aware there'll be others of the opinion they'd rather not be educated at all. They just like to make some bread that works, and so we'll be open to putting sugar in at the beginning of every recipe. But at least this way, you kind of got the option. Well, yes, look at that. Did you see that? It's wicked, isn't it? It's like fireworks. Something's happening now, you see. The yeast is starting to make gas bubbles, and that is lifting the yeast to the top. Now, it won't all go to the top and fluff up like a massive cappuccino, right? It's going to go up, and it's going to start to disperse in the water, and it will go down again, and it will continue this sort of up and down kind of journey for a little while. But in comparison to the glass on the right-hand side, something is definitely happening here. There's activity going on because of that sugar. The one on the right-hand side would be as if the yeast wasn't working. Nothing's happening at all. And the left one, clearly something's happening. Is that exciting or what? And this would happen if you're using dry yeast or fresh yeast. It would happen the same. In fact, the dry yeast is more likely to make like a creamy foamy head on the top of your glass. And if you want to do this, you completely can. If you're worried about how long your dry yeast has been open for example, or how old your fresh yeast is, or maybe you froze it for a bit and you're a little bit unsure whether it's going to work or not, or maybe you're just the kind of person who has insurance for your insurance, then do it. You can either do this using the water and yeast quantities in your actual recipe if you like, by adding some sugar to it, and go ahead and make your bread with that, although then that teaspoon of sugar will then be in your bread, and that might be important to you, I don't know. Or you can do it with a little bit on the side separately from the ingredients, just like I've done here as an experiment, separate from the ingredients in your recipe, and just tip it down the sink after. But it depends on how you feel about wastage. But there it is, something's happening. The yeast is eating up the sugar. It's made bubbles and foamed up. It's moving around. It's telling us that it's happy, it's lively, and if this happens, then it will puff up our bread dough nicely later on. It's letting us know that everything from this point on will be plain sailing. And if that's the reassurance you need, then hey, take it. Do your little test and rest easy down the line. There it is. Let's have a little look on the top. You can see, let me focus this, hold on. There we go. That is, some of it is floating, some of it is sinking, but it's moving around. There's a lot of stuff going on in that glass in comparison to the other one, and I hope that's obvious.
And there it is, just when you thought I hit the peak of content creation with 8 minutes of kneading bread dough, just when you thought there's no way on earth I could possibly top that, I pulled it out of the bag with this. 6 minutes of watching yeast do pretty much nothing and then floating around a little bit towards the end. Thank you for being part of this channel. If you don't want to miss any more of this dynamite content, click subscribe before you go, or even better, sign up for your Home Baker's Bulletin, a weekly email of all my content for the week directly in your inbox every single Thursday morning. There's a link underneath, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
And there it is. There's no way I can top this video. I've hit the pinnacle. Now it's time for me to retire and hang up my apron for good. But before I do, consider visiting the Bake with Jack online shop if you'd like Bake with Jack bits and bobs in your kitchen for your home baking journey. Visit bakewithjack.co.uk/shop. See ya.